Hi, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Dr. Lucy and I am a clinical psychologist based in Melbourne, Australia. And this channel is a discussion and exploration of the intersection between modern day psychology and Islamic teachings, particularly stories and teachings from the Quran. It's been a while since I posted a video and it's something that I've been planning to get back to. So this is my re-entry video back into YouTube and hopefully plan to be posting more regularly. So I wanted to start this video with an issue that I see commonly in the Muslim community around shame and stigma with mental health and mental illness. And what triggered me to film this video was recently talking to a client, and this client was saying to me that they were struggling with anxiety and depression, and this has been a long-term struggle. And they were saying that one of the things that they really enjoy doing is listening to lectures and getting a boost in their connection, their spiritual connection. But there's always this sense of shaming around the experience of having anxiety and depression. And what I mean by that is messages from most likely well-meaning speakers who say things like, you know, if you just have trust in Allah, then you wouldn't have anxiety. And if you have strong iman, then you wouldn't get depression. And this is something that this particular client was saying, that, you know, I'm listening to these lectures to boost my spiritual connection, and then I find that I end up feeling really bad about myself because I'm struggling with anxiety and depression. And these speakers are actually making me feel quite ashamed as a believer that I'm struggling. And we had a bit of a conversation around this. And it got me thinking about how much of this stigma and shame is perpetuated through sometimes well-meaning people who are, you know, talking about religion, talking about faith, talking about connection to Allah, and yet the impact can mean that people come away and think, you know what, well, if I must not have strong faith if I'm struggling. And this is something that I've seen many years over my time of being Muslim. In the early years when I had first embraced Islam and I had been training as a psychologist, I would hear this message quite commonly in the Muslim community. People saying things like, you know, Muslims shouldn't need to see a psychologist, Muslims shouldn't need to get mental health treatment, because if we've just got strong faith, then we wouldn't have mental health issues. And this used to really disturb me. And part of my PhD research actually interviewed Muslims who were suffering with mental health problems. And one of the things that came out is a lot of people saying, you know, it really put me back when people would say, well, why don't you just have strong faith in Allah? Why don't you have strong connection? If you did, then you wouldn't be suffering with mental illness. And what came out of this research is people saying, you know what, I was already struggling with mental illness, and now I'm also being told that I'm not strong enough in my faith. And it was very, very demoralizing. So over the years of me in my training and in my practice as a psychologist, I actually think we've come a long way as a community. I think there is so much more awareness around mental health. There are so many programs, there are so many talks online. And I actually think we've moved away considerably from a lot of these very, again, well-meaning, most likely, but quite judgmental stances of intermingling religion with mental illness. And so I look at this progress and I think, you know, this is something that we no longer have as judgmental attitudes as were perpetuated maybe 20 odd years ago. But when I was speaking with this client, it made me realize this is still an issue that is perpetuated among Muslims, and most likely probably among other faiths as well. And I think it's really something that we need to keep coming back to and returning to, because the research on stigma actually shows that stigma has a significant barrier to recovering from a mental health issue. And some research has actually shown that the negative effects of stigma and shame around having a mental health issue is actually worse than the symptoms of the mental health issue itself. And so and I've seen this in my practice, when we can start to reduce a person's sense of shame and stigma and self-judgment around the struggles that they have, recovery becomes so much easier. Because when a person is carrying these judgments, or they're getting judgments from others of, well, why are you struggling? You should just turn to your faith, and you should just strengthen your faith. And these things can really put a person back if they feel like there's judgment. Now, I want to be really clear. I think faith is amazing for our mental health. And this is one of the reasons why I love the intersection between psychology and mental health treatment, because we know, I think in just instinctively, that faith boosts our mental health. Studies also and research supports that faith is amazing for our mental health. Having a connection to a higher power, having that trust that there's a God that's looking out for us, and that we're not alone, and there's a purpose and a meaning. This is amazing for our mental health. But where people get it wrong is they confuse things that are from religion and faith that are good for our mental health, like prayer, like reading Quran, like trusting in God. And they think, well, if you were doing those things, then you wouldn't have mental health problems. And this is where we have an issue, because there is nothing to say that because we have things like prayer and we have this deep love and trust and worship of God, that we won't have mental health issues. There's nowhere that it says that. And in fact, when I reflect on the verses of Quran and I read through the stories, if anything, what I see is the message is we as human beings are going to struggle. That there's going to be a lot that is really going to be very hard on lots of different levels and in lots of different ways. That we as human beings are not going to just go through this life and it's all going to be easy. And we have that message that Allah says, do not think that you can say we believe and you won't be tested. There are many verses where Allah says things to the effect of, the people of the past were so tested to the point where they and the prophets with them would call out and say, when is the help of Allah coming? We have stories repeat all through the Quran of people in distress, whether it's Ayyub alayhi salam, Yusuf alayhi salam, Ibrahim, Musa, they go, Maryam alayhi salam. The stories go on. And what we see of their stories is not the highlight reels. We don't see when life is going well for them. We see the examples when things are testing them and they're struggling and it's hard and they feel like they are alone. In some examples, like Yunus alayhi salam, that he's in a very dark place and is upset with himself for his choices. We have the story of Maryam alayhi salam, where she's giving birth and she's thinking everybody's going to hate me and they're all going to judge me. And these stories are all through the Quran. What does this tell us? This tells us that life is hard and we're going to struggle. And again, we don't see the prophets just sitting back and saying, you know what, I'm not going to be upset, I'm not going to be anxious, I'm not going to be disturbed. No, we see they're human, that they struggle, that they cry. And this is part of the human condition, and the deen is something to give us to comfort us. Doesn't mean that we're not going to struggle with symptoms such as anxiety and depression. And we should not be saying things to people like, well, if you just had strong iman, then you wouldn't be struggling with this. And another thing that people say, which is also well-meaning but very judgmental, when someone's struggling and they say, well, you should look at people who are worse off than you because people around the world are struggling more than you. Which in some sense, yes, that could be true. And yes, it is also true that sometimes when we look at people who are struggling more than us, it helps us to be grateful for our situation. But when we say this to somebody else who expresses that they are going through distress or they express that they're going through difficulty, and we say, well, people around the world or in other places are going through a much harder time than you, it comes off as very judgmental. It's lacking compassion. It's lacking empathy. And again, these is when we intermix perspectives and teachings from religion, very well-meaning, and they can come off as being very shaming, very blaming, very judgmental. And so it's something that I want to just give a reminder that no one will get to the end of this life and say, you know what, it was easy, it was a breeze. I just breezed through life and I was just success all the way. Nobody says that. This life is difficult. And for some people, they are going to struggle with finances, they're going to struggle with health, they're going to struggle with family, and some people through these difficulties are going to struggle with mental health issues. And it's not a reflection of them having weak faith or weak belief necessarily. And so if we can start to reinforce the message of, you know what, we as humans, we're messy creatures, and things are going to be challenging in this life. We are all going to go through tests and challenges. And if we can normalize it and get away from this idea of, you know, that oh, you know, I've got it all together and I've got things all worked out. Really, none of us have got it all together and worked out all of the time. We're all going to be messy. We're all going to struggle. We're all going to go through times where we feel like we're not coping well, or we're struck with symptoms of severe anxiety or severe depression or other difficulties. When we can start to normalize it and say, you know what, that is it's a very normal experience, and the best thing that we can do is continue to spread awareness, continue to advocate for people seeking mental health treatment, because the research shows that when we seek treatment, professional treatment for mental health conditions, it shortens the time it takes to recover. It reduces the distress considerably. We know professional treatment works. And yes, we can also hold on to elements of our religion that are helpful for us, whether it's prayer, whether it's reading the lessons of the Quran, whether it's just contemplation and connection to Allah. We can also draw on that too. But the key thing is that we need to be mindful that we're not saying things or spreading ideas that are judgmental for people who are struggling and making out as if it's just something easy that we can snap out of. The more that we can be compassionate to each other and also to ourselves, and stay out of judgment for our community who may be struggling and ourselves, the better it will be for us to be able to treat and recover from mental health illnesses. And this is a benefit for everybody. I hope this was helpful, and I plan, inshallah, to continue to post regularly. So I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. I wish you the best love, light, and peace in your life every day. I'll see you in the next video.